we're pushing forward a new way of storing data, managing data. It's sort of like, disruptive, which makes Filecoin so unique. Filecoin is basically a blockchain enabled decentralized storage architecture that is built on IPFS with an incentive layer around it.
Today we have an incredible guest with us. He is the head of network growth at one of the top ecosystems in the entire Web3 space, called Protocol Labs. More specifically, this seasoned expert of nearly 20 years is spearheading the growth of the largest decentralized data storage protocol in Web3 at Filecoin, which is currently ranked number 32 on the list of top Web3 projects, with a market cap of 1.4 billion at the time of this recording. I'm your host, Felix Cao, and I'd like to welcome Stefaan Vervaet to the Web3 Mission Possible podcast. How are you doing today, Stefaan?
Hey, Felix. Thanks for inviting me today. Thank you for
Absolute pleasure.
having me. Yeah,
Excellent.
excited.
Perfect. So you know what? Let's start things off with a very interesting question here, just so that our audience can get to know you better, and then we'll dive a bit more into your background and how you got into Web3. So what's one thing that you're absolutely passionate about in life, and how did it shape the person you are today? So it could be any type of experience. It doesn't have to be work related or anything like that. Just
Passionate.
something.
Oh, I'm
Hmm.
passionate about learning new things and
Love it.
the craft of trying something new. So, for example, over the weekend, I bought a DJ controller board to
Oh,
start
nice.
mixing my own, just because, I always wanted to do it, and it's a very creative, uh,
Outlet.
yeah, exercise. Yeah, to just like outlet is a good word.
I
Let
love
yourself
that.
go and forget about all the stress that you're going through at work. So,
Yeah, I could totally relate that. Were you always like into creativity, especially when it comes to the music side of things?
not really. Music is new for me.
Hmm.
Beforehand, it was, I mean, in technology, yes, right? Doing multiple startups, trying new stuff out. From a like if you look at my sport back, I mean, look at the sports that I do, I would say yes. Like I did road biking, kite surfing, swimming,
Awesome.
volleyball. I mean, a little bit of everything. So, but music is definitely new.
That
Yeah.
is incredible. But I love the mentality, just trying new things, and that's how we explore and we really find what it is that we're passionate about. A lot of people are really in a way afraid to try new things because there is a lot of learning and there's a lot of fears that come into it. But I like how you see it from the perspective of this is something I'm going to try. I'm going to see if I like it, and then also it adds to your experience of life as well. And this certainly helps, especially being in the business world and especially in being the head of growth, is you gotta have to try a lot of different things to see what really fits the market at that time, right? Or even forming key partnerships with people and seeing how that how those relationships really turn out for mutual benefit for both sides.
Yeah, definitely now in the bear market, right? So Web3 is already a little bit wild, wild west.
Hmm.
It's getting a lot better, definitely more structured, I would say. And but yeah, we're pushing forward a new way of storing data, managing data. It's sort of like, disruptive, right? In a way that
Absolutely.
it does require people that are willing to like push through these boundaries. And so yeah, so I
That's
feel very
exciting.
comfortable here.
Hey, we're in the right space, right? So it's a wild,
That's
wild
right.
west. We're looking to push boundaries, and we're looking to try new things. And if you look at what really allows Web3 to evolve and grow into something that's really, really special, we need people like yourself to be in the space to really be able to, kind of shift the paradigm into something that is not nothing that's currently available, and to make something that's a lot better than what currently existed. So this is really exciting. I'm absolutely stoked to have you on this podcast. So before we go into what you're currently working on now, Stefan, let's go a bit into your background. So I understand that you have nearly 20 years of expertise in the tech space, ranging from product management, sales, business development, partnership building, a ton of marketing. So how do you decide to take all that skill and talent and transition into the Web3 space?
Yeah. I mean, maybe going back to the first startups, because if you look at my history, I've done two
Hmm.
startups in storage or data management. The first one was focused on using hashing technology to dedupe data. So basically, you had all these backups moving to tape or disk,
Right.
and there was a lot of like overhead because you would constantly back up the same data from the previous day,
Hmm.
and so we would use hashing technology, so basically MD5 sum, and then eventually became a combination of multiple hashes to dedupe the data out of these data sets. Now, today it's commoditized, but at the time, the word deduplication was sort of a bad word. And we had to
Right.
convince analysts of the value of it. And not only that, just it was more about building trust that this hashing technology wouldn't be broken. And, people could really, really couldn't, maliciously like change the content without
Correct.
changing the hash. And so it became an interesting, couple of years, but it turned out really well. Sold that company to Veritas at the time. This is 2005, and the rest is history. It became commoditized. Some other
Hmm.
companies did something similar and got bought by EMC. So really focused on enterprise. By the way, these are enterprise solutions focused on bringing enterprise data sets
Right.
onto a new type of emerging technology. The second startup was focused again on hashing, using hashing technology this time to build more reliable, robust distributed systems based on erasure coding. Erasure coding today it's again commoditized in
Hmm.
a lot of the storage architectures, and also the hyperscalers are using it. But at the time, that wasn't the case. And again, here as well, we went on a journey to test, validate, because at the time the CPUs were not performing enough. They were
Hmm.
not performant enough to actually run all these complex. It wasn't that complex, but you're doing erasure coding on a CPU that never really was optimized for it. So we kind of worked with Intel, who was one of our investors, to like optimize the SEC. I think it was 4.2 instruction set at the
Hmm.
time. And so like those are the kind of things you have to do, is really like, you know, not just pitch or try to find, customers to adopt your stack, but also influence industry, industry leaders that
Correct.
kind of are driving a different strategy. And so bringing them on board either as strategic investors or
Hmm.
to an alliance where you can collaborate, and kind of showcase to them that, hey, this is not just us trying to make money, it's actually bringing value to the end customer. And by the way, you Intel or you Seagate or you Ernst and Young, whoever the vendor is that's
Yep.
coming in with providing the advice, you can make money on that as well, and you can
Hmm.
help your customers make that transition. So I think a lot. I mean, I learned a lot in these two startups, and so for me, it was sort of like, I mean, yeah, it was a given that I wanted to go into Web3, because I saw one, so many similarities with what we're doing here at Protocol Labs. But not only that, the stack is there, right? We really have a very robust stack that
Hmm.
um, was actually solving for a lot of the challenges that I hadn't seen any other solution solve for. And yeah, anyway, I don't know if that's answered your question.
Yeah,
I
that
just
that
like went
certainly
off.
answers my question. It's we backtracked from 2005 pretty much where everything started, and this, as you mentioned, is creating all these relationships between the vendors and users, making sure that everybody benefits and understands what the true benefits for everybody is, and then how you saw the parallel of what had happened early on working at the two startups to what's happening in Web3 today, and you found it as a natural fit. So let's actually look at those two startups real quick. You said that you learned a lot of things. We have startup founders that will be listening, a lot of co-founders, for example. What would you say would be, let's say, the number one lesson that you had learned working at those two startups?
Be persistent.
Yeah.
Don't give up, seriously, because like I remember actually both startups, we were
Hmm.
just sort of at the brink. I mean, we're almost going bankrupt. One of them was pretty serious, where we always went bankrupt. And you start questioning, did I make the right decision?
Hmm.
Was everything, all these people, all these naysayers really correct? And I hate to believe that. But so going back to like, why you're a believer in this product and why you're pushing this forward and standing by your hypothesis and having the data to support it, which is what we did. We had all that. It was sort of like, no, it was giving us confidence. No, this is right. We're doing the right thing. We've done this before.
Yep.
So what helped me personally in those moments, just like today,
Hmm.
because we are in a bear market and it's really hard for all developers out there and people that are looking to raise funding. It's super difficult. Is to make sure that you truly believe in what you're building because your heart has to be in it. I know this is a given, but I am a similar person in the way that I wouldn't want to work for anything I don't believe in, that I stand by and that I
That's
will
true.
fight for. So it's like you're all in or you're not.
Yeah.
And if it's not an all in, then it's time to find something else. And so again, the previous two startups was like, I'm all in, I'm riding this till the end. I'm a strong believer. The world doesn't know what they're missing until they're actually seeing it.
Hmm.
So I feel like we're in the same boat here today. Uh, like right now, Web3 is under attack, right? Definitely in the US. Um, but it's not everywhere. I mean, like I just came back from Hong Kong a couple of months ago. Very strong support all the way up into, the government entities that are really trying to do their best to
Yeah.
help startups and are building accelerator programs. This is phenomenal, right?
Hmm.
Because it's a little bit what we're seeing is, yeah, there's a lot of money involved too, right? There's a lot of
Absolutely.
investment that comes with it, and it's here to stay. It's not going to go away. It's just like, can you regulate it in a safe way so that governments feel comfortable with it and builders don't have to think about getting five lawyers on their books to just like justify or like make sure their company doesn't get sued or and it actually survives and they can
Yep.
focus on actually building technology instead of trying to worry about the regulation all the time because that is really hard. So anyway, so there's other areas where there's a huge support and
Hmm.
because we definitely Falcon are a one decentralized but a global network, right, across
Right.
44 different countries and growing. And it's truly permissionless. So you actually see this network moving from one area, like moving, meaning you actually see systems coming online every single
From
day. And
globally, right? That's what you mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
globally, like across the world, like if systems in Africa, Vietnam, I mean, Malaysia,
Wow.
Thailand, and we don't
That is
even know
awesome.
who these people are, right? And so there's obviously the larger SP storage providers that are very known because they've come to our events and they've been
Hmm.
very active and vocal online on GitHub, yeah, on GitHub, and so, but there's a lot of people that are participating and are not really visible, and that's the beauty of this network and beauty of
Signs
this.
of adoption, right? So that's
Right,
true
right.
sign of adoption, especially if you don't know where they're coming from too.
That's right. That's right. And it's a what I meant by it's a living organism is that yeah, there's also businesses that are leaving, right? And
Hmm.
they stepped in at a time where, it was more profitable and now it's harder and they're not willing to like become a provider of sort like truly like hunting customers down and bringing those data sets on board. I mean, that's natural, and I think we're very supportive of a very wide and a wide variety of storage providers, and that
Hmm.
comes unfortunately with some people leaving the ecosystem at different times, and so that's exactly what an economy is, which is what we're building, a digital economy,
Right.
because everything we do at PL and not just PL, the Falcon Foundation and all these other ecosystem members that are contributing to this network, because we are not in charge of the network. That's actually a very important factor is that it is a community of entities that is building on this network out. Is that where was I going with this? Yeah, it's basically what I was saying is that we don't control the network, but we do see trends and we do see adoption happening
Hmm.
in certain regions more than others. And it kind of comes in waves, right?
Yeah.
Like when China kicked out the miners 2 years ago, we saw even though Falcon wasn't called out, it was more Bitcoin and Ethereum
Hmm.
because we're not a proof of work type of solution. or our mining solution, we did see a whole transition happening, right? With providers, we call them providers,
Yeah,
not
like
miners, because
yeah.
they're actually providing something. They're providing a
Mm-hmm.
service. We're actually storing data. We're actually providing uh, retrieval services or
Correct.
storing services. So my point is that we did see a movement, and we did see SPs moving to Hong Kong, to Singapore, to the US,
Wow.
actually, that expanded. And those that were not serious about building out an international business or serious about the network, they either decommissioned, moved
Mm-hmm.
away, and or just redeployed their Filecoin tokens in a different way, because you can actually lend them out and you can enable other ecosystem partners and still like get a yield on it. So we're really seeing this. And what I was going to get to is that everything we do is in a very similar way as if you're building a digital or a real economy,
Right.
But in this case, it's a digital economy that goes cross borders,
Mm-hmm.
which allows you to scale faster as long as you find an ecosystem of community members that is aligned with your vision, which is so beautiful because you don't have to kind of go through the traditional hierarchical government institutions. You're really just like reaching out to the community, how many people are on Earth? 11 billion, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's in the
That
billions
are
for
willing
sure.
to, right, that are willing to participate. And you know what? If you're willing to join this journey, then this is how you can contribute. You can you can contribute in different ways. And so the way we look at our programs that
Mm-hmm.
we enable are very similar, right? We create awareness programs, training, right? You have to
Yeah.
train your citizens, right, or your ecosystem partners in this case.
Mm-hmm.
There's subsidies or like support programs that through these block rewards provide a better yield to the providers and therefore subsidize the actual cost back to the end customer, which makes it more attractive. And so, but all of this is in
It's a
code, meaning this is
big
all part of
feedback
the
cycle, right? That pretty much a
yeah.
big feedback cycle of support and incentives that allows everything to grow organically.
Yeah, so the block rewards that are minted by the protocol
Mm-hmm.
are directly correlated to how much an ecosystem member contributes to the network in capacity.
Right. Well, let's
And
actually touch on that. So
okay,
let's
sure.
actually dive into that. So right now, we'll have a lot of people listening. They'll want to understand, how does, let's say, Filecoin, how does it actually work? Like the whole decentralized storage system, for example, with the storage providers. How would, let's say, a storage provider become one? First of all, what benefits do they get? Also, you have your IPFS. What is that? And and then obviously you have people that are looking to store their data onto with Filecoin, and and how does the whole kind of ecosystem come together. So if you could elaborate on that, Stefan, I think that would be perfect for our audience, just to understand from just different points of view of how you have all these different components come together and really make Filecoin a really key player when it comes to decentralized data storage.
Yeah. Okay. So good question. So maybe I need to go back, right? Juan, the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
founder of Protocol Labs and a ton of technologies, um, started working on IPFS,
Right.
Interplanetary File System, back in 2012, 2013, and founded the company of Protocol Labs in 2014 when he announced IPFS. And IPFS is a distributed, like open source, by the way. It's an open source file system that addresses the data in a different way than today data is being addressed. Like if you want to get access to your pictures on
Mm-hmm.
your phone or in the cloud, you're reaching out through your app over HTTP. And so it's a pretty standard protocol that has been adopted worldwide. And it's sort of like the standard way of connecting between your device and the central server that's hosting your data. Now, the reason why Juan worked on IPFS is because it addresses the data in a different way. So it's using a content addressable hash
Okay.
instead of an IP address, which is what you would use, or a host name
Mm-hmm.
and a port that you would use to connect to the server to fetch your data back. And so the value of having a content addressable storage, which by the way is nothing new, like in 2000, Filepool and EMC, they had a product that was doing very similar
Right.
content addressable storage, but it wasn't enabled by blockchain. And so what makes blockchain so what makes Filecoin so unique? Filecoin is basically a blockchain enabled decentralized storage architecture that is built on IPFS with an incentive layer around it so that anyone who's joining the network is following certain rules, and
Mm-hmm.
that's all written in code, right? For example, one of them is you have to verify the data on a daily basis, and you have to run these hash checks, these cryptographic hash checks on a daily basis within a certain time window to prove that you still have the data. And so it's called
Right.
proof of replication. You're
Mm-hmm.
proving that you still have the replica of this data, and
On
the
your
replica is still like stored in its original format. It hasn't been changed. And so my point is that IPFS is sort of the foundation and was the open source stack without any blockchain, any like incentive layer, but it built the foundation for a lot of Web3 developers that
right.
wanted to address storage in a much easier way. Because in the traditional way, you have to know exactly where the file is stored. You have
Mm-hmm.
to understand how to fetch the data. Where with IPFS, what you need is the content hash. And because the content hash is unique for every data globally that is ever stored, you now have this unique way to index and find a file as long as you use the IPFS network. And the only way to make this truly scalable is through the open source community, and really like built a stack that is so appealing that the community across the world is willing to develop on it and contribute to it. And
Right.
so right now we have thousands of contributors to the IPFS stack, and it's one of the foundation building blocks for Web3 developers. And so later on in 2020, so 3 years ago, almost like in 10 days, it will have been 3 years. Filecoin became mainnet. So obviously, there's a lot of development in 2018 to 2020, and there was a whole ICO before that, where Prial raised a lot of funds to like work on
Mm-hmm.
this new product called Filecoin. And Filecoin is really like this, decentralized storage network enabled by blockchain. And the goal there was to build this trusted layer around IPFS, or a version of an implementation of IPFS. And so the outcome of that is that in 2020, Filecoin went mainnet, and we saw a huge adoption of providers running the Filecoin stack. And so the way the incentive program is built, or the incentive, every blockchain has an incentive, right,
Mm-hmm.
to bring supply or users online. Is that the strategy here with this Filecoin network was to bring supply online first in the first phase, which we have done successfully, or the network has done
Mm-hmm.
successfully. We have brought more than 10 exabytes of capacity online
Wow.
in the last 3 years, but that was online pretty quickly. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
say, within like a year and a half, we reached that point. Then when in last year, about this time, we accelerated the effort of phase two. And phase two was to bring more data sets onto the network.
Got it.
Obviously, uh, the macro environment kind of accelerated that as well, because with the price going down, the providers had to find new ways to generate revenue. And
Mm-hmm.
so one way of generating revenue is obviously bringing more data sets onto the network, because there was an incentive built into the network, and it's called the Filecoin Plus program, that incentivizes anyone to bring data sets to the network and allocate those data sets, or assign them to a storage provider to store it, and that storage provider would get 10 times more block rewards if they store
Wow.
data than
That's
just providing capacity. So there's like
now.
the second phase happening.
Can I just
Yeah,
jump in for a second? In terms of the storage
sure.
provider, so who could become a storage provider? So let's say that, obviously, preferably you want like big data centers or people who have access to that to be an SP. But let's say, can the regular person who goes, okay, you know what, I have, let's say a server or a device, and I'd like to become an SP. Like, what are you currently looking for that would be like the ideal storage provider for Protocol Labs and Filecoin, so that the people listening would be like, oh, you know what, that's me. Let me get in touch with Stefan.
Yeah. So one, anyone can join, right? So then the question is, meaning they can download Filecoin stack. So we have different
Mm-hmm.
implementations managed by different teams. Again, there's some redundancy built in there as well. One of the most commonly used platforms is Lotus. It's called Lotus. It's an Filecoin implementation. Venus is the second, and then you have Forest. I mean, there's a few other ones, but basically you can go to falcon.io,
Okay.
follow the provide link, and there's a whole documentation for anyone who wants to join the network on how to install it, how to contribute. But really, if you look at who is active, very active in our ecosystem, it's typically providers that are that have a long-term mindset
Mm-hmm.
with actually building a business that will store real data, not just miners, right? So we kind of rebranded as a community when I came in 3 years ago, and I said, hey, we shouldn't be calling this miners because we were called miners. We should be calling this storage providers because that's
Right.
really what they're doing. And so, like, so it would be typically a couple of 100 terabytes to petabytes right now. So we're no longer talking about someone who just wants to contribute with some extra storage space on their hard drive. No, absolutely not, because the requirements are pretty high in the sense that you
Mm-hmm.
have to buy collateral. So when you start, you cannot only you don't only have to submit hardware, but you also have to purchase Filecoin tokens, put those in a wallet,
Okay.
the storage provider wallet, because or not we, but the algorithm requires that to hold the providers accountable in case that they're not keeping their data, on chain or not on chain, but in case they cannot verify that that the data integrity was maintained. So, as I was mentioning earlier, the protocol requires these providers to run these cryptographic
Mm-hmm.
hashes on a daily basis, and that spits out a series of cryptographic hashes, which are then compared with the hashes that were previously calculated. And if those are mismatched, that means the data was
Changed,
corrupted.
right? Changed or
Right, it was
corrupted.
corrupted or
Yeah.
changed. And so then the algorithm will slash, and that actually means burn Filecoin that's sitting in a wallet that is owned by the provider. So there is money at stake. And that's the only reason why this network can guarantee that data integrity is maintained, because it's such a high setup cost. Why
Mm-hmm.
are providers willing to do that? Well, it's because there's also an upside for them. And the upside is that they get to benefit from the block rewards. So
Right.
as they contribute to the network, they also get tokens allocated proportionally based on how much capacity they're adding to the network. And so, obviously, if you don't believe in the Filecoin network, if you don't believe that, data, a decentralized storage network is the future, then you're not going to participate anyway. So those that are participating are strong believers. They
Mm-hmm.
understand the value of data and protecting the data in a way that is unique and
Decentralized.
verifiable. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what I want to call out is that today, actually, it's very interesting in the last couple of weeks, I would say, or months, not even, we've actually seen a lot more talk about the verifiable web, which is what we have been talking about for years.
Mm-hmm.
And Filecoin is a verifiable storage building block, right? So we provide verifiable storage. And the reason why it's coming up more prominent now is because of this new AI wave, right?
With
Where
deepfake
a lot more
AI.
people, yeah, a lot more people are concerned about,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, was this LLM really trained with the data set that they claimed it to be trained
Mm-hmm.
with? So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities now where, this AI is intersecting with blockchain. And so there's different levels, right? Where AI can help blockchain stacks, but in the end, it's all driven by not just the models, but the data that's actually feeding those
Correct.
models. And so that's where there's a ton of opportunity for us to go after, specifically because, Filecoin is the largest decentralized network out there.
Mm-hmm.
One, two has been running for 3 years successfully, and is three like runs in like real data centers, like tier 3 data centers. Like if you would go to some of our largest providers, they're running next to the Googles and the Amazons, right? And they're in the
Wow.
same data center locations, and so they have very robust infrastructure. Now, of course, it's very, we have different ones, right? We have some storage providers that are running their systems at
Hmm.
home, but even that is getting harder because the more you invest, the more money there's at stake in case something goes wrong. And then you don't want to rely on local power facility. You want to have redundant power. You want to have redundant
Hmm.
networking infrastructure. And that comes, when you move to a real data center location.
I think that's
So
so important because a lot of people, especially right now, they're probably wondering or they have the question, let's say, why would I choose, let's say, to store my data on a decentralized SP versus something that I understand right now, which would be like AWS, Google Cloud, for example, Dropbox, Evernote, all those other storage, centralized storage services. And you just highlighted all the different reasons why it would be important to have that redundancy and to really have it, kind of so that no central authority really controls it, right? So
there's a couple of things. Yeah, if I
yeah,
can
if you
add to
can
that,
add
there's a
to it,
couple
that'd
of
be
things.
great.
Yeah, so in Europe, it's data sovereignty. Example is like a big
Hmm.
discussion point, like making sure that data is actually stored within the physical boundaries, like of the country,
Okay.
or there could be other boundaries, but just the ability to spin up a system that is part of a bigger network
Hmm.
that because the benefit of the network is not only are you speaking in the same language, you're contributing in the same way, but you can leverage the network as a backup, right? So what we're seeing right now is there's data being copied across continents within the network, the Filecoin network. Like we have providers in Australia working with providers in Amsterdam and Austin, and so there's this, and even Singapore and Hong Kong. Like it's really a melting pot, which is fantastic to see, because one of the requirements that we've implemented in the algorithm was that specifically for Filecoin Plus, right, is that multiple copies have to be made across the network and they have
Hmm.
to be on different continents. And so what that kind of forced was collaboration across entities, across continents. And so that makes the network also stronger. And so the reason why that's important is that Amazon or Google, Microsoft do not always have facilities in these locations. Why? Because they will typically deploy or build a new data center if they have 80% of it allocated for.
Hmm.
Where in some of the smaller environments, you could just like smaller areas, you can just spin up a Filecoin instance and still like get some benefits of the network and
Right.
tap into economies of scale, so to speak. So you don't have to provide two data centers, three data centers, but you can just be that first data center, and then you can use other SPs in the network as a backup and negotiate a good deal. The other thing that comes up is the egress costs. So, some of the cloud providers today, the top cloud providers, they charge for pulling your data back out of the cloud, and so that's
Oh,
expensive.
interesting.
And we are
Hmm.
seeing some early signals, definitely because again of this AI wave. We're seeing some early signals from enterprises and just in general businesses that are looking at running their own LLMs, right,
Hmm.
on premise. And then they're looking at bringing some of those data sets back and also building their own infrastructure again. Because, remember in the last 15 years, there was this whole 17 years, I would say, it was this whole transition from on premises, right, your own
Yeah.
data centers to the cloud. And what I'm saying is like right now, we're sort of like seeing some signals that, definitely for these AI use cases, some of that is coming back, primarily because not everyone trusts running their LMs in the cloud.
Hmm.
They may resolve that, or they may build that trust, but the reality is there will always be like a demand for on premises now, just because they want those data sets to be in a secured environment.
Hmm.
And it's becoming more clear that now you can do a lot more, and you have these stronger LLMs that
Yeah.
could drive, differentiation. And not only that, if you're not doing it, you're probably going to get behind because others are doing it. So
Hmm.
again, all of this is beneficial for Filecoin as well, because you could run a Filecoin node and guarantee that your data is verifiably stored, meaning you can like point to an on-chain record that
Yeah.
proves that, hey, this data was not only stored, it's still the same as it was stored 5 months ago.
Hmm.
And that's what I've been using. So now we have to build a bridge, right? So one thing we're focusing on right now, because this is not all like said and done. I think the one thing I'm like seeing is like the signals are positive. Like this new wave is actually helping us to drive the narrative of verifiability.
Hmm.
It's fantastic. You have an industry is talking about what you've been talking about for the last 2 years. It's fantastic. Right now, the next step is how do we actually build that bridge? And the bridge, what I mean by that is if you go back to 2006, AWS came out with their S3 interface. And just like at the time, I was working on another startup, right? And we were all looking at it, and it was, again, a lot of naysayers, right?
Yeah. Oh, there's always
um,
gonna be naysayers. Even when you make it, there'll be naysayers.
that's right. That's right. It's funny. It's like, if you see like two opposites, right? If you see naysayers and yaysayers and nothing in between, you got something, right?
Yeah.
So that's like,
Very polarizing. That's where
like
you know you're in a good
my
spot.
it's polarizing. You're like, okay, we're on to something. It's a matter of time and execution. So that's where
Hmm.
we're at right now. No, what I was saying is that at the time they came out with a S3 interface, and why it's so important is that uh, an object based or a key value store storage target was very new to the market and is very hard to use because everyone was using their file systems, and
Right.
it was POSIX, and it wasn't like stateless like object storage was. And there was lots of benefits to object storage, and it was the right thing to do
Hmm.
because it truly allows you to scale and access your data from pretty much anywhere in the world. But it took minimum, like I was looking back because last week I was kind of thinking about what happened. So in 2008, what we saw, it was 2 years after Amazon came out with that, we saw like all these on-ramps coming up, like these startups that were making the transition or the bridge from file to object. And so what they would do is
Okay.
on the front end, they would speak file, and they would make it a lot easier for traditional applications to use
Hmm.
the cloud with this on-ramp approach. So it would be literally a device, an appliance, or a virtual appliance would bring it in. It would speak file on the front, and it would actually do the translation on the back end and do all the orchestration and caching that was required. So that was in 2008. Started in 2008, and it took till 2015 before that actually, before S3 or the object interfaces became natively supported in some of the major data management apps. And then, today, most of the applications between 2015 and right now, I would say most of the applications have like completely transitioned into becoming cloud applications themselves. Like even the traditional, like, data management
Yeah.
stacks have completely transitioned. So my point in this is that it took like really 15 years minimum for it to become mainstream. And in between, there was I remember there's a lot of like challenges, right?
Hmm.
Where, even some of these major Web2 apps had given up on objects. I remember one with Veeam in particular, where they had to send a notification to their customers. This is all public, but my point is they were not necessarily rewriting their applications. They were sort of like, patching it on top
Oh.
of it. And they didn't really want to change their underlying
Source code,
garbage
right?
collection policy. And
Hmm.
because they were so used to a file system and it
Yeah.
worked. And it's just like it took time before enough customers complained and said, hey, you're behind. You need to adopt this object storage target sufficiently and really like optimize for it for performance and so on until it actually got like adopted. So I think we're in the same position right now. Like I know we're in the same position right now
Hmm.
where there is a need for more on ramps and on ramps that are making the translation between now object and content addressable storage. And that's where we are right now to go after this Web2 ecosystem or these Web2 data sets.
Yeah.
And then how this integration will work is going to be dependent from use case to use case. And yeah, that's why there's a lot of like discussions right now, and how can we fit into those AI workloads in
Hmm.
an efficient way so that maybe initially you store a backup to Filecoin, which is what is a really good fit right now because
Hmm.
then you have an on-chain proof. And so yeah, that's where the discussions are going right now.
So you mentioned that it took like 15 years really for things to really bridge. Like, and we're at the same spot that you see right now. Do you think it'll take that long, or do you think that that time frame will be a lot more collapsed to really make it happen?
Yeah, it's already moving faster here. I mean, just in the last 3 years, we went through, this is the third phase, right?
Okay.
Phase one was getting capacity online. Then we
Mm-hmm.
moved into a phase of storing public data sets, really incentivizing the ecosystem to store data. And
Right.
initially it wasn't like paid deals. It was really like let's collect all the open source data sets,
Mm-hmm.
move them to Filecoin in anticipation for when compute becomes available.
Yeah.
Because right now these open data sets are behind closed firewalls. Like there's multiple examples. Like there's some NASA data sets that were not even they were supposed to be made available to the open source community, like the research community, and they just didn't find a good way to do that because they had to
Mm-hmm.
invest in like the right security and they needed a file server and they need someone to maintain it. And so we just moved that like the ecosystem like picked it up, moved it into Filecoin and made it available publicly. So there's a lot of good things that are happening that happened. And now we're moving into this transition where SPs are truly like going after paid deals. And we're seeing sales providers show up. Like last week, we had an event in Vegas, and we had a big sales provider. Sorry, we're using our own type of terminology here, but basically, like in a traditional Web2 world, this would be a VAR or a value-added reseller, basically,
Okay.
right? That has a connection with the end customer and is trying to resell something, and
Right.
is currently reselling Amazon services or Google services or EMC, NetApp, you name it, and is interested in looking at reselling services for the Filecoin network. So
Mm-hmm.
that's fantastic. So it's already accelerating, but the bridge is still going to happen in phases, meaning that the bridging will happen in phases, and I anticipate a very similar um, play as what happened back in the day with object storage, and that is you'll have the early adopters, like we
Right.
all know, the bridging the chasm. And at the time, it was primarily research and media and entertainment that was driving some of these early storage techniques or storage solutions. And that's because they care about their data, they care
Mm-hmm.
about they're willing to take a risk. They know it's been paid off before in the past, and also because they're very competitive, right? I mean, as a researcher, your time to research, your time to, invention or discovery, and not invention but discovery is like it's a race.
Yeah.
And in
You want to
media
be
and
the
entertainment
first
is
to make that
you want to be the
announcement.
first, right? Yeah, there's multiple examples of that. So, and then having the proof that you have all the data and having the proof that, those were the data sets. I mean, there's a lot there. And so we're seeing the same behavior. Now, at the same time, we're still growing with the Web3 market as well. So we're
Mm-hmm.
not giving up, obviously, but that is growing at a different pace. That is what we're seeing there is it's even though Filecoin is storing more than 200 million NFTs, which is fantastic,
Wow.
right? That was a huge
Mm-hmm.
use case two
Yeah.
years ago. It's not driving the capacities we're going after. So we have a lot of wins under our belt, and yet depends on what the I'd say what's hot on people's mind right now. People are not thinking about NFTs right now. People
Mm-hmm.
are thinking about other things, the bear
Yeah.
market more than anything else, and AI. So finding that bridge, I think AI is these new LLMs and these new, some call confidential LLMs or private architectures where you can run your own LLMs is sort of like
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity for us to go after. And if we can weave in this verifiability and find the right connectors, I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity for us to go after. And it's going to happen in phases. Like I said, if there's like a killer app that all of a sudden, or a killer connection or bridge that comes out that could change everything like within a matter of days. So, and that's what we're doing right now is like try to build as many bridges and enable as many ecosystem partners that are currently aggregating data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of going directly after end customers, which our partners are doing anyway, we're also going after these aggregators, these data on-ramps that currently manage a lot of data. And ideally, we would like them to point just to Filecoin as another tier, but not just another storage tier, but a more intelligent storage tier that now delivers you with a proof of replication, a proof on chain that the data is actually still there and it's the integrity is maintained. Which with other solutions, it's all very custom and you have to typically pay more for that.
Right.
And so that's not where it ends because we also have a virtual machine, we have smart contracts, but first we need to get our foot in the door in the
Mm-hmm.
Web2 world. I mean, because in Web3, smart contracts are sort of like, of course, everyone understands that, but in Web2, it's a little bit like
It takes more time to
overwhelming.
educate. You need time to
Yeah.
educate. That's usually the thesis. And I just want to piggyback on what you had mentioned there, where like in terms of because we have a large community, especially when it comes to the gaming space, and you mentioned what really drives, like let's say in terms of like let's say clients or customers looking to store their data with Filecoin. You mentioned that there's people who really care about the data coming from the academia world, and then you got media and entertainment. So we could look at games as, let's say, bucket into the entertainment realm. So right now, let's say listening to the podcast, I love what you told me, and I understand it somewhat, but how does, let's say, I'm a gaming studio, a gaming developer, and I want to now file my data with Filecoin. So how would you explain the benefits of somebody who comes from the gaming industry, and how that could be a win-win situation by working with by storing their data with Filecoin, or the other one, as you mentioned, right now you're focusing in terms of growth, is really finding people that are really centers of influence, and they have a ton of people that are your ideal your ideal audience that you want to bring into your ecosystem. Like, how would you explain it in terms of how they would benefit specifically if they're in the gaming world?
The gaming world.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have some examples of gaming like companies that are working with Web3 Storage. Web3 Storage is one on-ramp that kind of
Perfect. Can you
focuses
can you
on.
share some of it so that the listeners have a very tangible and concrete idea of how they may benefit from it?
Yeah, it's really like they can store their NFTs. But we have actually NFT Storage as well, specifically for
Perfect.
the applications that are looking to store NFTs. And there you have some NFT marketplaces and some gaming companies that are storing on Filecoin, NFTs on Filecoin. So I would look at NFT.storage, look at the docs. There's some examples of how users implemented it. And then Web3.storage is more generic,
Mm-hmm.
but it gives you the same type of functionality. So it gives you that CID back, meaning you store data, you get a CID, sorry, it's a content index. So it's this unique identifier, content identifier that you can then use to retrieve data from other gateways, or you can actually retrieve the data from the IPFS network. So this data here, the benefit of NFT.storage and Web3.storage is that it caches your data for fast retrieval. So
Okay.
it's more than just an on-ramp that moves it into the network. It actually allows you to get reasonable performance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's the reason why that's important is because in gaming, that's super crucial to have the access to your files pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um, but like you can mint your NFTs now on Filecoin natively, so you don't have to just do it on Polygon anymore. So that's maybe another way to benefit from it is that you only have to transact in one token because you can mint your NFT on Filecoin and you can pay to store your NFT, your actual digital copy on top of Filecoin as well. Now,
Much more seamless
um,
process. Remove
it's
steps in
seamless,
between.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're still positioning Filecoin as more like a backup and archive tier,
Mm-hmm.
not like as the hot storage tier. It for NFT storage and Web3 storage are fast enough
Yeah.
for delivering like secondary storage, but not primary storage. Like it's not like running on an NVMe flash or anything like that. So, but like I said today, we've seen solutions that mint their NFTs on like a Polygon or an Ethereum, and then they store the actual digital copy in Amazon. And you talk to them, you're like, hey, it's great that you have a copy in the cloud, but what if that goes away? You stop paying your bills, or you want to move to a different provider. you're sort of like vendor locked in. And typically it's like, yeah, we need to decentralize our
Hmm.
actual data as well. Let's just start by storing an archive copy and a backup copy on Filecoin, and then let's see how we can transition. So yeah, that's where the value comes in. Now, all of this is of course improving. Some providers in our network provide a fast tier as well, so they will cache it for um, those applications. So it kind of depends, and that was the whole purpose too. Is like, we should have a very alive ecosystem that competes and builds new
Right.
technologies on top of the stack, because that all contributes to building out a much more decentralized and also like sustainable network, instead of having like a couple of on ramps that are ingesting all this data. So
Hmm.
we're and you'll actually see there's some developers that are building custom applications, right, for specific verticals. You see it in the creative side. One of them is like Audius, which is more like a Spotify competitor. Again, like you see in the creative sector where there has been a lot of monopolization, right? Like take Spotify and the label
Yeah.
companies, they've collaborated together, and 80%, from what I understand, goes to those label companies and
Yeah. So it's like
Spotify, and
an
only
oligarchy.
20% of us. Yeah. And so if imagine now that you have platforms where you as a creator, you can just set your incentives directly
Hmm.
with your fans. And for those that follow you on this platform instead of Spotify, they will get higher yields as the early fans, right? As being one of the first fans or few fans to like support them on this new platform. So you can create their own following, they can create their own incentives, and so there's a ton of opportunity there that
That
wasn't available
That's
beforehand.
awesome. And we could, what we'll do is we'll grab those links as well, and then we'll obviously have your contact information, Stefan, and any listeners that want to pursue that particular route, look at Filecoin. We want you to get in touch with Stefan, and he's your man to get that process going. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits to that. I could definitely see why a lot of Web2 companies, especially in the gaming sector, would want to file their data with Filecoin on a decentralized storage system. So that was a fantastic explanation, Stefan. And then
I'm also, yeah,
okay, go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead,
Yeah, I'm
Stefan.
also adding a couple of links. So
Perfect.
for those that are interested in understanding better what are some of the Web3 users that are currently storing data on Falcon, you can go to dstore.com as well.
Hmm.
Falcon.io will actually lead to it too, because what we realized is that, and it's pretty standard, is that a Web2 user that's interested in decentralized storage, which by the way, we're seeing a lot more interest in the
Yeah.
last couple of months, like people actually searching for decentralized storage, which is fantastic. They don't they get thrown off by Filecoin, right? Not by Filecoin, they get thrown off by the word coin
Hmm.
and crypto. So, we started a separate brand called dstore.com, which is main focus to create awareness for decentralized storage and evangelize there through that website what some of the value props were that users got by storing data onto Filecoin. And so for those that are interested in like, okay, what is this in layman terms? How does this look like from an end customer, like an end customer doesn't know anything about
Right.
blockchain or crypto, then point them to dsor.com, because the goal there is really to educate them on decentralized storage, and there's real case studies. But again, put it in the perspective of Web 2, not Web 3, right? Because we
That's so
have
important.
also fought.
Because meeting
That's
where
right.
the users at, right? Making sure that we explain things in a way where it parlays on top of their previous experiences, and they could just build it on top of their frame of knowledge. So this you would recommend D-Store as the first place to check out, so that our listeners have a much better understanding of how the whole decentralized storage system over at Filecoin will help benefit them.
That's right. And then for those that are interested in, how much or how can I stake Filecoin, like really
Hmm.
the token holders, we have another website called filecointldr.io,
And we'll leave these
where you
links
can get
in the show notes, by the way, so the listeners could access
perfect,
this. Yeah.
right? Because we have five stakeholders, main stakeholders in our community, and for each one of them, we have separate focused marketing efforts and support, programs that are
Mm-hmm.
being built. And if you had it all in one site, it became too difficult for those stakeholders to actually find what they were looking for. And so we kind of build out these separate pages, and that seems to work because, it's really hard to go after a Web2 customer when you're talking about staking, or it's really hard to go after token holders when you're talking about, just a high level value prop.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be able to show how, the token is really enabling all of this. That's utility token. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, lots to do there. There's a lot going on. We're building way more than decentralized storage. We are working with partners on decentralized compute. We're
Wow.
building a CDN type of solution as well. So there's teams. And when I say we, I mean like there's teams within the network that are
Mm-hmm.
building that on top of Filecoin. All of these are pretty big bets, but again, that's what the market is asking for. And so we also built, just coming back to my earlier comments in the conversation, we also built a decentralized storage alliance. Why did we do that? We started that a little bit less than a year ago. That's the dsalliance.io. And that was really with its main purpose to put decentralized storage in front of large corporations. And if you,
Okay.
as I mentioned earlier, right, so my story about how we worked with Intel to change the instruction set, and
Mm-hmm.
Intel adopted it and then became like sort of it enabled ecosystem because now everyone could do ratio coding, and today it's sort of like no or very little overhead
Yeah.
in the CPU. So the point here was that we needed a forum for industry vendors to come together to talk about these things instead
Mm-hmm.
of with PL. And so we built this decentralized storage alliance. Today we have Intel, I think we have Intel, Seagate, Ernst and Young,
Some big heavy hitters there.
Supermicro. Yeah, we have
Mm-hmm.
a few other ones. Solaris. I mean, they're not all on the website yet. I see here, but this was as of last week. AMD, right?
Yeah.
AMD is part of it. So, and this alliance has been focused on how can we bring, and it's not just a marketing alliance, but also how can we improve, right? The the algorithms to run faster on the latest GPUs,
Mm-hmm.
CPUs, and then how can we bring the message, like the value prop, to of Web3 and then decentralized storage to the enterprises, and that's a longer strategy. But we have a client working group, we have a storage provider working group, and there we're trying to be very focused. Like for example, one of them is how can we like let's go after some AI use cases and really kind of vet out what is the value prop of verifiable storage, and then create a case study around it and a reference architecture that others can see and build around. And then same thing for the reference architectures on the storage provider side.
Mm-hmm.
How can we optimize the cost and make it more competitive against the traditional vendors by
Yeah.
getting faster access to early, because what happens is these hyperscalers, they get access to higher density drives or newer CPUs, and because they're the largest buyers, they get access, as they get first access, they get the best deals.
Yeah. Like
So how
first
do we as
dibs.
a network differentiate enough so that and integrate faster?
Mm-hmm.
And that's only done by working with these vendors directly. So yeah, so that's and then there's the whole regulatory part. I know we haven't talked about that, but
Mm-hmm.
like how do you optimize SOC 2, which is a compliance, is like a audit. It's basically an audit report that is regulated, or it's basically validating that the data that you're managing on behalf of someone else is managed in a certain way, and it's auditing the processes around it. And there's things that
Making
we
sure
can
it's
improve.
compliant, right?
It's compliant, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, and there's things that we can improve because it was built for Web 2. How do we adjust this for Web 3? And
Mm-hmm.
are there ways that we can use on-chain information to reduce the cost of such an audit, but also provide more transparency that maybe, accelerates the time to be compliant? And so there's a lot of good conversations that are happening right now. They're not visible necessarily, right, to the wider ecosystem because they're very technical, but having the right people that
Right.
are currently engaged on the Web2 side, like for example, E&Y was saying, hey, we do SOC 2 audits all day long, right? We
Hmm.
can tell you exactly where you can improve. I mean, I cannot come up with that. I can hire someone, but there's no time for it. You want people to be on board that believe in our vision and also have the expertise to actually go execute and make a change.
Love
So
that.
that's what we're working on. There's a lot
Yeah,
more.
that's tons. I love to, you shared tons here, and we'll leave all the links so that, people could learn about yourself, Stefan, and also, all the wonderful things that are happening over at Protocol Labs and Filecoin. So, you had alluded, or you brought up regulations. Let's touch on that. And I think that's really, really key right now, because in Web3, we're seeing a lot of regulations. You go onto any news site or crypto news, and you'll see, SEC, for example, with Binance, Coinbase, XRP. You'll hear also, exchanges securing licenses all around the globe, for example. I'd like to hear your thoughts on, what's your views on the impact of regulations on crypto and, let's say, the whole Web3, and also how does, regulations impact everything that's happening at Protocol Labs as well. So, if you could provide your insights on that, the audience will love to hear how you see, regulations really playing into the whole Web3 and crypto world. Oh, you're just on mute right now, Stefan.
Oh
There you
yeah,
go.
that was on purpose. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not. I'm not a lawyer, but obviously, look, I think in the long term, regulation is the right path. I think
Hmm.
it's going to help developers and yeah, just like anyone in this ecosystem that is building a business on top of the network and is a strong believer, to like you know more safely invest in their businesses. And I just think the way we're going about it is not necessarily the right way, but that's a different story. Also,
Hmm.
I think competition is real, meaning across countries. Like what I
It's
just mentioned
globally
to you
now.
is like
Yeah.
it's globally. So in a certain way, that's good because when other regions step up, which is what's happening right now outside of the US in particular, it will drive more investment in those regions and more innovation. And therefore, like, it doesn't necessarily stop because one country or one government decided that this is not the right the right solution, or it's not a good solution for their country right now. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, I think our efforts are also we're always trying to enable the ecosystem globally, and that's
Hmm.
really hard. But naturally, you have to follow where the belief and the belief systems are aligned, government and regulatory environments are aligned, and so for the rest, we're also supporting the community and creating more awareness around the value prop of like Falcon as a utility token, which we
Hmm.
are, and we're truly decentralized. And so a lot of it is educating, um, authorities and sharing like all the benefit we're bringing to the world. Meaning, if you look at how many startups are being built on the stacks that we have created, I mean, I haven't even brought up libp2p or there's other tools that we've built that actually are used right now by the Ethereum network. I mean, this is
Awesome.
just impressive, right? And
Hmm.
people are always thinking about they come in and they say, "Oh, crypto, it's crypto." It's the same stuff. And the reality, that's not. Every chain is different. Every network is different. Every network has a different
That's
community,
correct.
has different values, and so you only see that when you actually step in and go deeper, um,
Yeah, from
and
the
actually
outside,
get to
everything
meet.
looks the same. But yeah, once you actually
Right.
get involved in it, you'll start to see how, things really begin to differentiate, as you mentioned. Like things are happening at Filecoin versus, in addition to all these other ecosystems that are working. By the end of the day, they're all contributing to the Web3 and crypto space.
That's right. That's right. I mean, there's different communities. If you go to one of the Falcon events, you'll notice it's a very passionate community that believes
Hmm.
in changing the world, and yeah. So I think I think it's in the end, long term, it will be a good
Good
thing.
thing.
So we definitely welcome it, but it's just the way
This
some
it,
governments go about it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I like how you summed it up. It's pretty much regulations are there just as long as it enables innovation to happen. And unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of that. In particular, the U.S. And companies are leaving to go set up shop at different countries. And as you mentioned, the competition is global. So regulations, it's something that's necessary because we do see a lot of bad actors in the space as well, which gives the
Yeah.
name, the space. We want to get, or minimize their impact on the ecosystem so that we could see retail adoption and just the overall space really grow the way that it really should, with the right talent and the right people in the mindset of to really contribute, really change the world, and make Web3 something that's really really awesome for everybody that gets involved in, for the future generations as well. So I'd like to ask you these last questions here. So what are your thoughts in terms of, right now we're sitting in a bear market, we've been in one for quite some time here. So what do you think is gonna take us out of the bear market?
Wow. Um, uh, I think a lot on, well, look, I'm not a financial expert or,
That's okay. All
but
this stuff is for, just
yeah, no,
educational
no.
purposes. Then nothing on this podcast is financial advice, legal advice, or, any
Right,
professional
right.
advice of any kind. So feel free to share
Yeah,
openly your opinion.
this is the personal opinion. I think a lot will happen. I mean, or will depend on the election in next year in
Mm-hmm.
the US. There's a
Yep.
lot of influence there. So that's important. And two is like if there is a use case that all of a sudden like explodes and that could like move a lot faster.
Mm-hmm. What do
I
you think
think
that use case
then
could be? Just like just looking at the landscape right
I
now.
mean like look, I would gravitate towards this new AI wave that's
Right.
coming in because one, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of investment that goes into it. So there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
more eyes on it. There's a lot more opportunity. There's builders like actively looking at the stack, but not only that, just in general, just the amount of effort and money that's flowing in that space will just naturally, it will, something will come out of it. And that
Yeah.
could be, another mid journey that explodes on Web3 or you name it. And those, those Web2 AI enabled startups are looking at Web3 more intensely because, look, Filecoin, even though it's primarily a storage network, it has a lot of GPUs in our network
Mm-hmm.
as well that are not necessarily utilized. And we've seen some startups building on the network and creating their own orchestration tools to incentivize the Filecoin storage providers to temporarily use their or like use their like GPUs for LLMs or other workloads and get compensated for that. And that's
Right.
for us, that's fantastic, right? You want to build
And by the way,
different stacks on top of the hardware.
I'm just gonna jump in really quick. In terms of getting compensated, that's in the FIL, right? So FIL. Just so that people
Yeah, so
understand,
the
yeah,
yeah,
like
no,
what
no,
the
that's a good
compensation
point.
comes in.
So
Yeah.
we're seeing all three. We're seeing Phil, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing fiat, and we're
Okay.
seeing whatever token was built by that layer two like orchestration tool.
Perfect.
And so you're seeing a little bit of everything because as soon as you start implementing another token, it's like, hey, what's the value of that token? Who's the
Mm-hmm.
team behind it? Where if it's native in Phil, it becomes like, yeah, I can use Phil to pledge. I can use Phil for my business. So, and if it's fiat, everyone can take on fiat. But the challenge then is like, is that entity that's bringing in the revenue also located in the location where the ESP is located? And
Mm-hmm.
if not, it becomes a little bit harder because then you have to think about how do I um, um, do the how do I track my finances? How do I report? I mean, it's a little bit harder, right? Because you have to convert from maybe US dollars to like euros instead of just using a token, which
Right.
makes it like you can use it tomorrow, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
today. It doesn't really matter.
You
The
don't have to worry
payment
about
rails are
conversions
there.
and stuff like that.
Exactly. You don't have to do so. That's one of the reasons why there's more gravitation towards tokens because then you can easily access the network
Mm-hmm.
without having to like build all these, or set up bank accounts and doing the triage, like the arbitrage maybe, or the risk management. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a better way of saying
Yeah.
it.
So there's eliminating all the steps in between. Love that.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at things, like right now in terms of the phase that we're in with Web3 and crypto, we had talked about how it's still in the early stages. In your opinion, Stefan, what's the most important challenge that needs to be solved in order for Web3 mass adoption to occur?
Um, so for Web3, so building the bridge, that's one. It just yeah, have more case studies, like actual demonstrated use
Mm-hmm.
cases, right? And then case studies to like bring the wider audience on board. I
Yep.
think what's happening right now, the downturn is actually forcing customers to rethink their current practices and
Mm-hmm.
their current vendors because, obviously prices are not going down. Actually, it's the opposite, right? Some of the storage vendors are actually increasing their pricing. Google increased their pricing in the last year, so did Wasabi. And so, what you're seeing is budgets are getting squeezed, but prices are going up. And so it's a perfect opportunity. And if I go back to the previous two startups where we made the most progress was during a downturn, like a bear market, and it's because customers are more interested in like trying something different. Because in a
Right.
good during the good times, it's you can lose your job for taking risks, but if
Mm-hmm.
there's budget enough, you're not gonna like take that risk. You're just gonna continue with the same solutions that you have because you don't want to take any risk. But in the bad times or the hard times, there's more upside in case something goes well, and there's less downside if something goes bad because you were just trying to save a buck or you're trying to save something, do something different.
So
And
the risk versus reward ratio is the way to assess it is totally different in a bear and a bull market. Love that. So
yeah,
we'll end this podcast with this questions too. So where can people go to learn more about you, Stefan, and what you're currently working on? So we'll add those links that we had talked about, and then anything else like your LinkedIn and so forth. So I'll let you answer that question.
sure. I mean, my LinkedIn, I can share my LinkedIn, and also, if you look at Falcon in general, like we post a
Mm-hmm.
lot of YouTubes, so
Okay,
definitely follow the Filecoin YouTube channel because
perfect.
just in the last 3 weeks, we had three major events and all these individual sessions, like because it's a lot of sessions, like where we go deeper on, fixing a certain problem or more strategic, like, discussions that we're having. They're all recorded and they
Mm-hmm.
get posted on YouTube because it's really hard to get such deep knowledge spread quickly across a very wide ecosystem. And so the best thing we can do is just
Put it on
record it,
video.
put it on
Yep.
video, and so people get the same like experience or close to experience that what we had in the room. And so I recommend people to go look for specifically Depth Summits, which is a new summit that we started, which are more technical deep dive sessions
Mm-hmm.
that we just had in the last 2 weeks. So go to the Falcon YouTube. For me personally, yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I should tweet more. I'll say that, but
I think all of
uh,
us could, especially when CT Crypto Twitter lives on there. Well, Stefan, you did an awesome job shining a big spotlight on one of the most important things when it comes to moving towards a more decentralized world, and the role that decentralized data storage is a core component to making all of that happen. So, thank you for being a wonderful guest on the podcast, and we look forward to bringing you back on the show in the near future. Let's chat again soon.
thank you, Felix. Thanks for
Absolutely.
having me.